So I usually break down my vegetables just to make them easier to work with. So these are perfectly fine. I'm just gonna go ahead and consider them scraps. So I'm just gonna chop them up into smaller pieces, it's all right, and just throw them in there. The general rule of thumb is all your cuts wanna be about the same size. So I'm gonna go ahead and julienne these. Julienne just means like a skinny long strip, right? Similar to a matchstick. So we can save and use all the kind of innards of the cucumber. If you wanted to, you can make a drink out of this. In the summertime, it'd be super refreshing. Just get some lime juice. The lemons will work too that were provided. A little bit of sugar and seltzer water would be fantastic on a hot day. I'm just gonna use them as scraps to marinate the steak. Cucumber isn't a traditional food you marinate with, but it's gonna be delicious regardless, so we're gonna do it. To julienne them, this is what we're doing. Just do like thin strips like that, right? We're gonna end up cutting them in half as well. That would be your julienne right there. If you wanted to dice them, you could just do your julienne and then go through, right? And dice them like that. Kind of whatever you wanna do, it's up to you. We're also gonna have the tomatoes we're gonna cut in half. We're gonna tear the basil and then the onions. Cucumbers and onions are what we're gonna cut to the same size. You know what, the more I think about it, we'll end up just dicing it. I think it'll just end up being easier in the long run. So everything that we're gonna dice and use for the salad, we're gonna throw in that bowl. So we'll just go through the rest of these cucumbers, cut them all up. So this salad was traditionally, I believe it was Italian, and it was to use the leftover bread, and they always have their fresh vegetables. Boom. Cucumbers diced. There's a lot of red onion in here, which is perfect because red onion and red meat go super well together. So I'm gonna cut the top off, I'm gonna cut the bottom off. I know everyone kind of has their own way of cutting onions, which is totally fine. Whatever's easiest for you. This way is always easiest for me, right? It's always easiest to peel the skin off because it's dry, it's chewy. You don't really want that. You really just kind of want the beautiful, nice, moist, wet innards. So we're just gonna use maybe the whole thing, but this other onion we'll use a little bit for the red wine vinaigrette, which we're gonna toss our entire salad in at the very end. Again, everyone's got their own way of cutting onions. Mine is to do juliennes this way, right? And then once you do that, I'll just line them all up, straighten them out. And then just like the cucumbers, we'll just go across them. So just like that, right? Same size as our cucumbers, everything's even, everything's neat. If you have any pieces left over that you don't like, we'll just throw them in with the scraps. Cool. Next is gonna be the tomatoes. These tomatoes are delicious. This guy, he just got squished, that's all, so we're just gonna toss him in there. So it'll hold the weight of your knife, so you can go like this and then just go down and through, right? Cut it in half, and we'll throw them in with the rest of our vegetables. So once you're pretty comfortable about the amount of vegetables you have, you can go ahead and stop. So this is pretty much going to be your salad. So when you have all your vegetables in here, you can kind of toss it up and see what it looks like. So there's a lot of cucumber in here because I cut up the whole thing. And I really like tomatoes, so I'm gonna add actually all of these tomatoes. So this will end up probably feeding 4 people pretty easily once we're done with it, which is great because you have a family for 4. You can get them all their fruits and vegetables and their starch in the beginning. You can give them their protein in the middle for their entree. And then your little ones, I'm sure, will love, as well as the adults, will love the semi-Fredo at the very end. So after we have all our vegetables cut, what we're gonna do is we're gonna season them. So we're gonna season them with salt, pepper, and all the salt is gonna draw a lot of the moisture out of these vegetables. The reason for that is that when we toast our bread, it's gonna be all dry, right? Because the plan and the original thought process of a panzanella salad is to use stale bread. So if you have bread that's in your pantry that's super old and you don't want to make a sandwich out of it because it's gross, well, you can make this and it'll be perfect. I also really like black pepper. So I go heavy on the black pepper, but just a pinch really. Same with the salt. You can kind of do as much or as little as you like. Then we're just gonna kind of stir it up and we're just gonna let it sit. So we'll notice in about 20 minutes or so that the bottom of this bowl, which you can see now is dry, will start pooling with some liquid. All the salt is gonna pull and extract the flavorful tomato juice, cucumber juice, red onion juice. It'll also soften up your vegetables a little bit and kind of tenderize them, if you will. So we'll kind of just leave this here, let it do its thing. Next thing on our list for the salad is gonna be for the croutons. You can take your bread. This one's fresh, which is perfect. Got it right out of the box, provided by Nourish. We don't need all of this. Yeah, we'll probably use about that much. So we're gonna set this to the side. We won't be needing that anymore. Italian bread is usually preferred for a panzanella, but honestly, you can use whatever. Brioche, sourdough, country, you can use a baguette. You really just want something to soak everything up. And then we're just gonna go down, julienne them again, and then we're gonna dice them. We'll throw them in the oven for probably about 10 minutes or so, just to dry them out, nothing more. So I turned my oven on this morning, so it's probably sitting around 300. Unfortunately, it might be a little hotter, but that's okay. Whatever you set it to, you can just change the time. So preferably, you want to do about 250 to 300 and probably let it go for 10 minutes or so. We're gonna line it with parchment paper. You don't need to, it's not a necessary step, but it does help prevent the bottom of the croutons being burned from the metal of the pan, because metal gets really hot super fast, and parchment paper doesn't as much. Salt and pepper if you would like to as well. Just a little oil, and then we'll do a little salt just so we can taste the bread when it comes out. All right, now we're gonna stick it in the oven. And then we'll set a timer and then we'll come back for that. Next is gonna be our dressing, the red wine vinaigrette. We're just gonna whisk it by hand. It's gonna be more of a rustic style. I mean, the salad is all kind of chopped up, tossed together. It's a rustic salad, so it's definitely okay. Red wine vinegar. You can kind of use any vinegar you'd like. I prefer red wine. Sherry vinegar is also really good. Champagne vinegar will work. White distilled, I probably would stay away from, but you can definitely still do it. This recipe also calls for shallots. We don't have shallots, we have red onion instead. Perfectly fine. Red onion is a little bit more spice or heat, bang or flavor, if you will, and shallots are definitely a little bit more mild. What we're just gonna do, because they are a little bit more pungent and hefty on the palate, we're just gonna use less than we normally would if we were using shallots. So instead of a half cup of shallots, we're just gonna use a quarter cup. So actually we're gonna end up just using quarter of the onion. Let me save the other quarter for later. So this one, you're gonna wanna mince. If you can brunoise, then brunoise. But right now we're just gonna mince. Brunoise is just smaller dice, that's all it is. Smaller than small. That's kind of a lot since it's not shallot, so we're actually only gonna use half. And garlic, definitely garlic. Garlic's gonna give this sauce a little bit of body. The oil is gonna mellow it out, and then vinegar is gonna make it sharp. So I'm gonna do the same thing as I did for the marinade for the steak. I'm just gonna crush them a little bit. It'll kind of help peel the skin off. so we can just have the actual garlic. And with this meat pan in front of me, with all the scraps, I can just throw them right in, right? Bam, bam. It's almost like a trash can, but we're just gonna be sustainable about it and reuse it. All right, bam. 3 cloves should be more than sufficient. Again, these recipes, pretty much general ideas. You can use as much or as little as you'd like to. A lot of this stuff you can do ahead of time, right? You can marinate this ahead of time. You can do all your knife works ahead of time. This dressing especially, you want to do ahead of time. The reason being is because garlic is very sharp. A lot of people might almost consider it spicy when it's raw. The salt, the vinegar, and everything like that that's in this dressing, after about a day or two, it really mellows the heat and the spice from the garlic. But I really like garlic, so. We also got some spices in our box. So we got a little bit of crushed red pepper, and we got some dried thyme leaves. If you're using fresh thyme, sometimes that's even better. It's a lot more expensive, and it's, for like home cooking, I wouldn't say it's worth it, just because of the, you know, the price, and you know, it ends up going bad and everything. But if you do have it, the greatest thing about it is, right, to peel them off this, you know, all the little leaves off the stem with the thyme to get in your dressing, and then you can put the stems in here with your steak, which will be even better. So I put about a teaspoon or so of the dried thyme leaves, and we're gonna do about the same for the crushed red pepper. Now, same thing as the garlic, right? Everything that's in there is really gonna start pulling all the oils out of this the longer it sits. So if you're not into heat and spice, you can go without or just use less. So we'll do about half a teaspoon. Mustard, Dijon. This is my favorite. This next part, a lot of people are gonna be curious about, but that's okay. I'm actually gonna use this again for 2 things. I'm gonna use it for the marinade and also the dressing. I'm not gonna use a lot though, because a little goes a long way. But we're gonna use about a teaspoon, right? Same as the herbs in our dressing. And then for the marinade, we'll use a little bit more. There's a lot more going on in there. My measuring cup here, right? This is gonna be a pint, right? Right up to the line. So pint is 2 cups, easy. I'm gonna do about 1 cup of vinegar. I'm gonna do 1 cup of oil. You can use extra virgin olive oil, blended oil, kind of whatever you want. We're gonna use extra virgin olive oil for this one, just because I have it right here. We're gonna end up using quite a bit of it. 1 cup. And other measuring, 1 cup. Red wine vinegar. Cool. So I got my vinegar, everything in there. The only thing I'm missing is sugar. Traditionally, people don't use powdered sugar in anything but desserts and cake. But that's what we have, so that's what we're doing. It's basically just a sweetener, right? So what are we doing with the sugar? We're just gonna add it just to kind of take some of that bite off the vinegar, right? Now, powdered sugar goes a lot further than regular granulated sugar, so definitely be careful about it. Most of the time, powdered sugar also contains cornstarch, which kind of gives it that cornstarch look, right? It'll be a thickener, which is fine. So we're just gonna mix this up. We're gonna add a little seasoning, right? To help bring out all the flavor, right? All the salt is gonna draw all the saliva in your mouth so you can actually taste, right? You can get all the flavor kind of going around all the saliva in your tongue, so your taste buds can taste every single part of each ingredient. So before we add the oil, we're gonna basically get our dressing made, and then we're gonna try it. This is always super important because usually if you're blending it and you emulsify it, you can't add anything to it without it breaking and separating again, right? So this is gonna be super pungent, super strong, because we haven't added the oil yet, so just keep that in mind. Oh man, it's like straight vinegar. So we're just gonna keep going a little bit. Just making sure that powdered sugar is hydrating and soaking up all the red wine vinegar. The term a lot of people in cooking use is called blooming. You want to bloom your spice, which means it's going to absorb whatever liquid it's in, right? So if I'm blooming my powdered sugar right now, it's absorbing the liquid. We're just going to whisk in the oil now. Boom, 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 boom. Super easy. So it is rustic, it's not emulsified, so it's gonna separate. That means every time we taste this now, your oil is gonna be on top and everything else is gonna be on the bottom. Just, if you're ever gonna taste it and it's like this, we're gonna mix it up first, just so we can grab both, right? You can see how it's separated. You got your oil and then everything else. Ooh, yeah. Oh yeah, definitely glad we didn't add that sugar. The oil's gonna mild it out, right? So that sharpness from the vinegar is gonna dull. The brightness is still gonna be there. It's just gonna be a little different. We're gonna check our croutons real quick. So they're definitely drying out, but once you move them around, the ones that are kind of half buried are still a little moist. So we're just gonna let it go for a little bit longer. And then we're just gonna set this dressing aside too. We're just gonna keep it right here. This will all end up coming together and it'll be fantastic and delicious. Now for our garnish, which is basically just our last finishing touches for that dish. It's gonna be the basil that was provided to us, right, our herbs. So this, super easy. What we're just gonna do, we're gonna pick all the stems off. Boom, boom. So we're gonna use that. We're gonna throw our stems in here. And we'll throw one leaf in there too, for good measure. This is gonna be super easy. So for our garnish, all we're gonna do is tear it, right? You get your leaf and we're gonna pull it apart. I like kind of leaving them a little bit on the bigger side, but it's up to you. You can also use your knife to cut them as well, if you prefer that. Just run your blade randomly through. The reason I like tearing it though, is because you kind of muddle them in your fingers and you break the seal on the leaf and get some of the oils out and the liquid in, bringing out some more of that flavor, make it a little bit more pungent. So I'm gonna get another bowl just to put it all together. So I put these croutons in here and then some of this veg in here too. Now it's been sitting for a while, so we're gonna notice, right? Like I said before, the salt's gonna pull all the moisture out of these vegetables. So how it was dry before, now that it's been sitting, you can see all that liquid. That liquid right there is gonna be your friend. So we're actually gonna try and scoop all that liquid and let it go over all the croutons, and then all the rest of this veg we're gonna throw in here like that. This dressing, because we didn't emulsify it, we just did it by hand, you can see that it's separated. So we have our oil on the top and our vinegar and everything in the bottom. So just make sure you just kind of mix it up before we put it on, so you get both parts of this dressing and not just all the oil that's on the top. So we cooked off the croutons, the bread, just to dry them out. We wanted all the moisture out of the croutons so it absorbs all the flavor of the red wine vinaigrette, all the tomato juice from the salt pulling it out, and everything like that. So then it's more flavorful. If we just use regular bread that's moist, delicious, just baked, that's fine too, because that bread's probably really delicious and fresh. But this I prefer. I think it's got a little bit more flavor to it. So we have all our parts in here, just like that. And then we're gonna get our basil too, right? You can have as much basil as little basil. Another good pairing for this is if you have any cheeses, goat cheese is really good, feta cheese, or mozzarella, burrata will work too. You can throw that in with this and it'd be really good, really tasty. So this is gonna be our salad. 2 spoons for sharing. And that guy's done. Chef Nick here. That was me thinking inside the box. You know, we had our salad, our entree, and then our semi-Fredo for dessert. And here I am challenging other chefs in the Valley of Phoenix to think inside the box.